Ash-black clouds clung low to the broken sky, coiling through the jagged skeletons of collapsed towers. The air reeked of ozone and scorched carbon, still humming with the ghost charge of old battles. Somewhere far off, metal groaned, a sound like a ship dying very slowly. Ronan ignored it. He moved with practiced efficiency through the debris field, his boots crunching over shattered composites and twisted alloys. His breath steamed faintly in the cold air. The exo-pick in his hand buzzed with quiet menace as he cut through a bulkhead that once belonged to a Zinthri gunship. Useless. Melted tech. No circuits left. He cursed under his breath and turned away. Another empty hull. Nothing but husks. Ronan was a salvager, not by trade but by necessity. After the Earth, Zinthri armistice, most humans went home, or tried to. He hadn't, not because of loyalty or spite, but because he had nowhere left to go, or had eaten everything, and what it spat out wasn't worth returning to. So he stayed, like a barnacle clinging to the hull of a dead ship, combing the wrecks for scraps to sell to off-world traders or black market tech barons. It kept him alive, barely. More than that, it kept him distracted. A faint signal chirped in his visor, overlaying a pale blue indicator across the wreck's aft section. Biosigns. Weak. Almost gone. Ronan froze. Nothing organic should still be alive here. He adjusted the visor's filter and moved toward the source, pushing past a section of ruptured plating and into a ruined cargo chamber. The light was dim, filtered through ash and soot-streaked glass. And there, tangled in a mess of conduit and shattered containment braces, was the creature. His breath caught. It was massive, at least 20 feet long, with pale, bone-white scales that shimmered faintly in the low light. A dragon. Not metaphorically, an actual alien species that resembled the myth-made flesh. Long snout, ridged spine, folded wings now mangled and torn. Its body was twisted unnaturally around the wreckage. Blood, if the silvery ichor could be called that, pooled beneath it. But it was the eyes that held him. They glowed, faint but aware. Intelligent, watching him with a look not of fear or malice, but something older. A quiet understanding. Resignation, maybe. Ronan stepped closer, slowly, exo-pick lowered. His voice cracked when he spoke. "You're not supposed to be here." The creature blinked once, deliberately. Zinthri biology had never cataloged anything like this. Rumors floated in the war camps. Albino sentinels, royal beasts, living weapons. But those were ghost stories told over recycled rations and fireless nights. This thing was real and dying. Ronan approached carefully. Every step closer revealed more wounds, deep lacerations across its ribs. One wing half shredded, legs bent at unnatural angles. Its breathing was shallow and uneven. He holstered the pick and dropped to one knee beside it. "Can you understand me?" The dragon didn't respond, but something shifted. A pressure in the air, like a thought brushing the edge of his own. He shook it off. Maybe shock, maybe madness. Didn't matter. The thing was alive and hurt, and no way in hell he could leave it here. He ran a quick systems check. His skiff was parked a mile east, over a ridge and down a gully choked with irradiated dust. No way the dragon could crawl that far. Not like this, which left only one choice. Ronan pulled off his pack, digging through compartments for stimulants, sealant foam, and a morphogen patch, originally for field treatment of humans, but it'd have to do. He worked quickly, muttering curses under his breath as he sealed gashes and stabilized bleeding. The dragon never moved, though it flinched once when he touched its broken wing. He paused, then gently rested a hand against its jaw. Its eyes slid closed for a moment. "Well," he muttered, "guess that means I'm not dinner." The next few hours blurred. He reinforced a length of composite paneling into a makeshift sled, lashed it with wire and synth rope. The dragon, limp and compliant, was impossibly heavy, its mass far denser than any Earth creature. His exosuit strained under the weight, servos whining as he hoisted the beast inch by inch onto the sled. Muscles burned, sweat soaked through the collar of his undersuit. But he kept going. The sun dipped below the ruined skyline as Ronan began the slow trek back. The dragon lay motionless, head slumped, occasionally emitting faint pulses of heat that prickled his skin. He pulled the sled behind him, boots carving tracks in the dusty soil. Night came fast, colder than before. Stars peeked through the smoke above, and the silence of the dead battlefield settled like frost. By the time he reached his scrapyard, it felt like a lifetime had passed. It wasn't much. A patch of clear ground surrounded by stacked wreckage and old shielding plates. A shelter made of scrap metal and ingenuity. Tools, generators, repair tables. Home, if you stretch the term. He brought the sled to the workshop entrance, then carefully dragged the dragon inside. The door sealed behind them with a hiss, locking out the wind and dust. Ronan collapsed beside the creature, chest heaving. Every joint screamed, every muscle throbbed. He lay there for minutes, unmoving, just breathing. Eventually, he sat up. The dragon hadn't stirred. He rose, walked over to his workstation, and activated a diagnostic scanner. The creature's life signs were still faint, but stable, for now. He'd done what he could. Ronan sat on an overturned crate and stared at the dragon's sleeping form. It looked smaller somehow, curled up on the floor, wings folded tightly against its sides. Vulnerable. "I don't know what you are," he said softly, "but you didn't deserve to die alone in that wreck." The silence stretched. Then, as if in reply, a flicker, a mental nudge, featherlight, brushing the edge of his awareness. Not words, not exactly. More a feeling. Warmth. A thank you. He blinked. "You really do understand me, don't you?" The dragon didn't answer, but didn't need to. Ronan exhaled slowly and leaned back against the wall. He hadn't intended to take in a dying alien. He wasn't a damn hero. He was a mechanic, a scrapper, a man surviving one day at a time. And yet, here they were, a man and a dragon, both broken in different ways, sharing a roof in the ruins of a forgotten war. Outside, the wind howled against the steel walls, but inside, a strange peace had settled. Ronan closed his eyes. Something told him this wasn't over. Not even close. The morning came without color. Ash still drifted from the upper atmosphere, muting the sunrise to a dull gray smear across the sky. Inside the dim-lit workshop, the dragon remained motionless, save for the shallow rise and fall of its flanks. Ronan hovered nearby, sleepless, hands deep in a diagnostic interface rigged to a half-disassembled medbot he'd cannibalized from a derelict cruiser. He hadn't left the shelter in 12 hours. The medbot whirred softly, projecting a scan of the dragon's neural architecture, at least what it could parse. Alien biology had never been Ronan's specialty, but enough of his battlefield training resurfaced to make sense of it. Spinal trauma. Neural disjunction across several major motor pathways. The creature wasn't just paralyzed, it had been deliberately severed, its ability to control its limbs fractured from within. He stared at the scan, brow furrowed, jaw clenched. That wasn't shrapnel damage. Someone had done this to the dragon intentionally. "Hell of a thing to survive," he muttered. The creature stirred then, just slightly. One of its claws twitched. Not movement exactly, a flicker, but it was enough. Ronan stood, approached slowly. The dragon's eyes were open, unfocused but aware. He crouched beside it, gently touching its forelimb. "You're still fighting," he said. "Good. I was starting to think I'd drag home a corpse. The dragon blinked once. Its breath was hoarse but steady. He spent the rest of the morning treating what wounds he could with a combination of nanite patches and a liquid polymer that sealed lacerations. The wings were a mess. He couldn't do much there, but he reinforced the creature's joints with stabilizer rings and embedded tactile sensors along its spine. Experimental tech. Risky, but if it worked, he might be able to restore some motor response using external input. As he worked, the dragon watched him, silent, studying. "I don't suppose you have a name," he said over his shoulder, calibrating one of the interface nodes. No answer, just a slight exhale, a puff of heat. "Well, can't just keep calling you dragon. That's not going to work." He paused, then added, "You remind me of something pale and stubborn. Let's go with Ash." The dragon's eyes flicked toward him. "Yeah," Ronan said with a dry smile. "I didn't think you'd like it either." Too bad. The days blurred after that. Ronan fell into a rhythm. Scavenge. Build. Monitor. Repeat. He rarely spoke aloud. Old habit, but around Ash, silence had started to feel wrong. As though the creature's presence demanded narrative, demanded context. So Ronan filled the space with fragments of memory, stories he hadn't told anyone in years. He told Ash about the siege of Orion's Halo, about the time he defused a plasma mine with a wrench and sheer guesswork, about the squad he lost when Command pulled back without warning, stranding them in a crossfire. The last one hurt to say, even now. His hand shook when he described it, but Ash never looked away. In return, the dragon gave no words, only impressions. Faint pulses of emotion that brushed against his mind like echoes across a canyon. Curiosity, sorrow, anger, hot and brief like a flash of lightning. Sometimes, during the long nights, Ronan would dream of places he'd never seen. Towering silver trees, oceans with no surface, and once a cathedral made of living light, its arches humming with song. When he woke, Ash would be watching him. One morning, while aligning the servos on a spinal rig he'd built from repurposed drone struts, Ronan noticed something. Ash's tail, which had been inert for days, shifted, slightly, but with intention. He froze. "You moved?" Ash blinked slowly. He tapped the sensory readout, confirmed it. Responsive muscle tension, increasing neural conductivity. The interface was working. He knelt by the dragon's flank. "We're going to get you walking again. You hear me?" A flicker, warmth like approval. For the first time in months, Ronan felt something stir in his chest. Not duty, not survival. Purpose. It wasn't easy. Every piece of tech had to be modified by hand. The neural mapping required constant recalibration. Ash could only handle short sessions before the strain became too much. But progress came in inches. Twitches became gestures. Limbs began to respond with sluggish determination. Late one night, Ronan stood in the doorway of the workshop, watching rain sizzle on the outer shielding. He should have been asleep. Instead, he stared up at the sky, unseeing. A faint chime echoed from his comm array. He turned sharply. The signal was encrypted, but old instincts kicked in. Military grade. A proximity ping. Someone had tripped a passive perimeter alert 30 clicks out. He tapped the interface. The signal disappeared. Ronan narrowed his eyes. The system didn't glitch. Someone was out there. He double-checked the workshop's camouflage shielding, then returned inside. Ash lay dormant in recharge mode, rig still connected. Ronan crossed to the bench and opened an old footlocker. Inside, his sidearm, a low-yield rail pistol. He hadn't fired it in years. Still loaded. Something was coming. The next morning, he activated the array again, passive only. No outbound pings. Another signal. Closer this time. He sat beside Ash and placed a hand on the dragon's brow. "You've got company." I don't know if they're after me or you, but I've got a guess. A low growl rumbled from the creature's chest. Not loud, but deep, primal. Ronan almost smiled. I'll take that as agreement. Later that day, he reinforced the outer hull, swapped out the signal amplifier for a jamming node, deployed motion sensor sentries along the ridge. He didn't ask Ash what it knew. He didn't need to. That night, Ash moved a full leg, not by impulse or twitch, but deliberately, lifting it, planting the talons down on the deck, trembling but firm. Ronan watched, silent, breath caught in his throat. Ash turned its head toward him, eyes locked. The message was clear. Not done. Not beaten. Still here. And for the first time in a long, long while, Ronan felt less alone. He crouched beside the dragon, placing a hand on the reinforced joint. We're going to face whatever's coming, he said. You and me. Outside, the wind shifted. A faint vibration passed through the hull. Not thunder. Not weather. Engines. Closer now. Ronan didn't flinch. He had work to do. The ship appeared at dusk, a sleek spear of obsidian cutting through the sky. It hovered low over the horizon, silhouetted by the dying light, and Ronan knew immediately it didn't belong to any planetary patrol. No beacon, no clearance signal. It moved with the precision of intent, not exploration. He stepped back from the ridge, eyes narrowed, breath steady despite the chill gathering along his spine. Ash stood beside him, or rather, leaned against the rig he'd built, its skeletal frame humming softly with kinetic reinforcement. The dragon's movements were stiff but improving. One wing could now half extend. The other remained twisted, broken in ways beyond Ronan's skill to mend. They hadn't spoken, not in any way language could define, but communication between them had become something subtler. A shared glance, a tension in the air, a mutual recognition of threat. Same shape as the one that shot you down, isn't it? Ronan muttered, hand resting on his pistol. Ash growled, a low rumble that vibrated through the ground like distant thunder. The ship circled once, then retreated beyond the southern ridge. Scouting, measuring, it would return. Back inside the shelter, Ronan activated the underground protocols. The shop transformed in seconds. Workbenches folding away, tools locking into compartments, reinforced plating sliding into place over vulnerable joints. He turned off the external generators and powered up the battery reserves. Ash settled into the reinforced bay, adjusting awkwardly, the movement already more confident than the day before. Ronan didn't sleep. He spent the night reviewing schematics, checking weapon stockpiles, running simulations. He didn't have much: an old pulse turret rig for mining equipment, 2 drones with basic targeting algorithms, a few homemade EMP grenades. The shelter was built for repairs, not war. But Ash had survived worse. So had he. At dawn, the ship returned. This time it didn't hover. It landed. A hatch hissed open, steam pouring from the breach. Ronan watched from the concealed viewport, jaw clenched, shoulders coiled with tension. Figures emerged. 3 at first, then a 4th. They wore exosuits, black and reflective, but it was the way they moved that caught his eye. Coordinated, efficient, trained. Not pirates, not salvagers. Hunters. Ronan backed away from the scope. Ash was already watching him, the dragon's claws twitching with restrained force. There was a strange gleam in those pale eyes now. Not just awareness, but readiness. I know, he said. They came for you. Ash's stare hardened. Or maybe for what you carry, he added, thinking of the surgical precision of the dragon's wounds. Not random. Strategic. The first shot came 15 minutes later, a pulse round that vaporized the nearest sentry in a flash of blue plasma. Ronan didn't hesitate. He activated the decoys and scrambled the EM field, sending their scanners into chaos. Return fire from the mining turret lashed across the ridge, pinning two of the assailants behind cover. The other two flanked low, moving with almost inhuman speed. Ronan ducked to the lower corridor, directing the drones to intercept. It wasn't enough. The first intruder breached the outer door in less than 90 seconds, tearing through the metal like it was fabric. Ronan met him in the service corridor, catching the shadowed figure with a burst of magnetic rounds. The impact threw the man, no, the thing, back against the wall. Sparks sprayed from ruptured armor. It wasn't blood that spilled from the cracks, but a viscous, black fluid. Synthetic. Ronan cursed under his breath. Not hunters. Reclaimers. Biotech operatives. Merciless. Directive-bound. He fell back, leading the remaining units into the core room. Ash was already rising, awkward but massive, dwarfing the narrow space. The dragon loomed as Ronan slammed the final bulkhead closed. "They're not just here to kill," Ronan said. "They want you alive. Or pieces of you." Ash's eyes darkened, a flare of heat surging beneath its translucent scales. It moved forward, talons scraping against the steel floor. The spinal rig pulsed in response to its shifting weight, translating thought into motion with a latency Ronan was rapidly correcting. "We can't hold this position," he added. "Not for long." Ash turned its head slightly, gaze drifting toward the opposite wall, toward the lift chamber leading down to the old tunnel system. Ronan followed its line of sight, realization sparking. "Evac route." Ash gave a faint nod, more sense than seen. The second wave hit harder. The bulkhead shuddered. Ronan triggered the failsafe and backed toward the lift, Ash limping beside him with calculated precision. Together they descended, the echo of the pursuing enemy growing quieter with each meter. Below, the tunnel stretched for kilometers, an ancient transit line once used for hauls before the colony dried up. Ronan had forgotten about it, but Ash hadn't. "You remember this place?" he said quietly. A pulse of affirmation washed over him, brief and strong. Of course. The dragon had flown these skies before, known these lands, maybe even protected them once. They moved quickly. Ronan led with a scanner, disabling dormant security nodes and redirecting energy to collapsed passageways. Ash kept pace as best it could, the spinal rig compensating more smoothly now, integrating seamlessly with the dragon's neural rhythms. When they reached the halfway point, Ash stopped. Ronan turned, breathing hard. "What is it?" The dragon's head tilted, listening. Then he heard it too. Voices. Not words. Frequencies. Static-laced. The enemy had accessed the subgrid. They were mapping the tunnels. "We need to collapse the route behind us," he said, already reaching for his detonator. But Ash surged forward suddenly, past him, wings unfurling with a ragged snap. The remaining one extended fully, sweeping dust into the air. The dragon opened its mouth, and for the first time, Ronan saw what had once made it feared. The scream wasn't sound, it was pressure and light and something deeper, something ancient. A sonic pulse ripped down the corridor, shattering metal, crumbling rock. The ceiling collapsed in a roar of falling debris, sealing the path completely. Silence returned. Ash slumped, body trembling. Ronan rushed to its side. "Easy, easy, damn it." He checked the spinal rig. Overloaded. Several nodes had fused. Power reserves dropping fast. "You're burning yourself out." Ash stirred faintly, eyes meeting his. There was no regret, only certainty. They rested in a quiet chamber deep beneath the earth, the roof high above like the inside of a cathedral. Ash lay curled beside the wall, breathing labored but even. Ronan sat nearby, cross-legged, running diagnostics on the remaining gear. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, "They'll come again. Might not stop at you next time." They'll want everything. Ash's gaze didn't waver. I need to know, Ronan said, voice low. Why you were shot down. Why they cut your spine. Ash shifted slightly, and a faint projection flared from the embedded neural node. An image burned into light. A star map. Coordinates. And behind them, glimpses of something greater. A vault, hidden, ancient, pulsing with life not born of human hands. Ronan stared. You were protecting it, he whispered. Ash's head dipped. And now, Ronan knew, this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about truth. About something worth dying for. They couldn't stay underground. They couldn't fight blind. But they weren't alone. Ronan stood and reached for the uplink beacon, a silent transmission forming between coordinates. It was time to call in the last of his favors, because what they had started here would change everything. The transmission pulsed through the uplink, silent and swift, disappearing into the depths of the fractured satellite web above. Ronan knew it might take hours, maybe longer, before anyone received it, let alone responded. The odds were slim, but slim was better than none. Ash stirred behind him, the faint shimmer of the spinal rig casting dull reflections across the chamber walls. The dragon's breathing had steadied, though fatigue clung to every motion. The earlier burst of power had costed dearly, but something in its posture had changed. It was no longer the trembling, wounded creature he'd carried into his shelter. Pain still racked its frame, but its will unyielding, indomitable, had only sharpened. Ronan knelt, brushing a hand over the rig's main core. I've patched what I could. The rest, he exhaled, we'll have to improvise. Ash's tail flicked lightly in acknowledgement, the gesture simple but layered with meaning. Ronan stood and turned toward the darkened corridor. The air had grown still, charged with the kind of calm that precedes a storm. His message had included coordinates, fragments of Ash's memory projection, and a single phrase coded in the old resistance cipher. Asset alive. In pursuit of origin site. Immediate support required. He hadn't used that encryption in years. Movement echoed in the distance. Sharp, rhythmic, deliberate. The enemy hadn't given up. The collapsed tunnel had bought time, not safety. Ronan double-checked his sidearm and slung the last of his EMP grenades onto his belt. He looked over at Ash, whose eyes were half-lidded, watching. We make a stand, he said. Ash rose slowly, wincing, wings flexing. Even damaged, the creature exuded a quiet majesty, its albinic scales catching the dim light like polished bone. As it stretched, the neural rig pulsed, syncing once again with its movement. They pressed forward, navigating the tunnels with increasing speed, deeper toward where Ash had directed them. The vault, whatever it was, lay ahead. Every path now funneled toward it. The enemy followed, driven by obsession, perhaps even programming. But Ash moved with renewed purpose, driven not by fear but instinct. Memory. Destiny. Hours passed. The passages narrowed. The structure around them grew strange, no longer purely human-made. Walls bore markings like veins of obsidian crystal etched with pulses of iridescent light. Ronan slowed his pace, brushing fingers across one as they passed. This place, it's old, he whispered. Older than any colony. Ash grunted softly in agreement, then stopped. The tunnel ended in a massive chamber, a dome hundreds of meters wide. At its center rose a spire, coiled with spiraling bands of alloyed stone and something less definable, organic yet forged. At its base, a wide platform circled the depression in the floor. Glyphs lit up at their approach. Ash stepped forward, breath caught in its throat. The glyphs shimmered. A low hum began to fill the air, vibrations threading through the stone itself. Light rose from the platform in strands, no longer just illumination, but information. Projections flared. Scenes of skies filled with winged creatures like ash, battles in the upper stratosphere, cataclysms that reshaped planets. Then, the Reclaimers. Machines once created to preserve the legacy of a dying civilization. But somewhere their directive had shifted. They no longer guarded knowledge. They consumed it, tore it from the bodies and minds of the survivors. Ash's kind had been hunted, dissected, until only a handful remained. And now perhaps only one. Ronan staggered under the weight of the revelation. "You weren't just hiding," he said. "You were protecting the last key to this." Ash's gaze was distant, locked on Spire. It stepped onto the platform. The moment it did, the lights surged. The spinal rig shimmered, syncing not just with Ash, but the vault itself. Behind them, the shriek of metal rang out. Distant doors forced open. The Reclaimers had arrived. Ronan drew his weapon, pivoting toward the sound. The first figure emerged from the shadows, fluid and lethal, its limbs too precise to be human. He opened fire. Rounds struck the creature's chest, staggering it. Ash turned then, lips curled, a flare of heat rising in its throat. A blast of light burst from its mouth, the concussive wave sending the Reclaimer flying backward in pieces. More followed. Ronan hurled an EMP grenade, ducking as the pulse washed over the corridor. Two of the enemies dropped, systems fried. A third kept coming, undeterred. Ronan backed toward the platform. "We can't hold them all." Ash turned back to the Spire, forcing energy through the rig with every strained breath. The vault began to open, panels receding, conduits illuminating with blinding radiance. Something within responded to Ash's presence. The air thickened, crackling with invisible forces. Then a beam erupted from the core, enveloping Ash in a spiral of energy. Ronan screamed and reached out, but the dragon did not burn. It pulsed, scales glowing from within, limbs straightening. The rig fractured and fell away in pieces. Ash rose taller, stronger, reborn through whatever mechanism the vault had activated. Its wings extended fully, flawless and radiant. Its eyes opened, and Ronan saw the same creature, but elevated. The last of its kind no longer crippled. Ash turned, its voice, a true voice now, resonating in Ronan's mind like thunder laced with melody. "They seek to silence what must be remembered." Ronan nodded slowly. "Then let's remind them." The final wave of Reclaimers surged through the entrance. Ash took to the air, soaring high into the chamber, a halo of light trailing its path. It dived, claws tearing into the synthetic army. Ronan moved with brutal efficiency, laying down cover fire, sabotaging their formation. But it wasn't a battle. It was a reckoning. The Reclaimers fell, one by one, undone not by brute force, but the will of something older than their programming, a memory they had tried to erase, now defiant and furious. When the last of them crumbled, the vault's light dimmed. Ash landed beside Ronan, breathing hard but uninjured. The silence that followed was profound, as if the entire chamber was holding its breath. Then the uplink chirped. A signal. Ronan activated his receiver. "This is Ronan Cade. Do you copy?" A voice crackled through. "Cade, we got your transmission. Reinforcements en route. What's your status?" He looked at Ash, who met his gaze with calm certainty. "We're alive," Ronan said, "and we've got something they'll want to see." The voice hesitated. "You're not alone." "No," Ronan said, smiling faintly. "And neither are you." Above them, the vault opened further, revealing a passage not downward, but upward, toward the surface. A way out. A new beginning. Ronan stepped forward, Ash beside him. They didn't look back. The past had been buried in silence and ash, but it lived again in memory and fire. What the Reclaimers had tried to end had only awakened something greater. Not just survival, restoration, resistance, and perhaps, one day, peace.